Nice.
Hey everyone, welcome to a special edition, limited release, small batch, rarity, second conversation follow-up to the sermon.
Yeah.
Most weeks we just get one, but this week Mario had some really good questions that...
And Dawson.
Mario and Dawson, that's right, they did come from Dawson. He had some really good questions, so we're coming to you a second time this week. Big special treat. Maybe we can add confetti to this video or something.
Whee!
Okay, so first video we talked about, right, like what does it mean to actually put a hindrance in someone's way to the gospel? How do we guard against that practically in our own lives? What would you say to someone who is claiming that there's a hindrance? Great questions, right?
Yeah.
Now for the second one, you asked, Paul says, hey, look, and we did kind of a quick hit, verses 4 through 10. Paul says, these false teachers have accused me of not being a legitimate apostle. They've accused me of not preaching the truth. Like, you can see by the evidence of my life that I'm genuine. Like, you can see that I'm sincere in my message. You can see that I'm sincere in my claims, that I'm practicing what I teach, and that what I am going through is proof of my apostleship. And so then you kind of asked a two-part question. You asked, should we be seeing those same evidences in our life? But then you also started to get into prosperity gospel a little bit. And I think that diverts a little bit from what Paul is saying, because what Paul is saying is he's addressing the direct attack against him, which is not, Christians should have an easy life, but Paul's not a real apostle. Like, Paul's not really a follower of Jesus. Paul's a false teacher. Not basically, Paul's saying those guys are false teachers.
Yeah.
The false teachers are saying, no, Paul's a false teacher.
Yeah.
And Paul's like, no, look, what I'm going through in life proves the authenticity of my office as an apostle. Like, proves my authenticity as a follower of Christ. And so that's the question I think we'll answer first.
Okay.
Because that was the first part of the question you asked, right? Like, should we be experiencing those same things? I would say yes. So what Paul is saying is like, look, Jesus said this stuff would be true of his apostles. This stuff is true of me.
Yeah.
This stuff is not true of those false teachers, you know? And so, now, you want to talk about a painful self-reflection? Jesus said, like, the world will not want to listen to you, right? They will hate your message. They will have no interest in what you're saying. They will mock you. They will scorn you. They will belittle you because you're declaring my message to them, right? So if the world has no problem with what I'm saying, is it because I'm not actually saying anything significant? Right? Like, if I'm a pastor who's never had people get ticked at a message, and not ticked, like, can people get ticked because I'm just an immature idiot who, spouts all, absolutely. No, I'm talking about like
has no...
I've never...
Like, doesn't rub,
doesn't step on people's toes, right? Doesn't poke up against our ego, doesn't poke up against our sin nature. If I've never said anything from the pulpit that made you, like, squirm with genuine conviction or even resist it, is it possible that I'm just saying watered down nonsense that will cause no offense? Let's go back to what we looked at in the first video, what we looked at in the sermon, right? The gospel is an offense. So if I've never said anything offensive, have I preached the gospel? If the gospel inherently has a fence in it, if the gospel inherently has stumbling blocks in it, and I've never said anything that offends people's ego or offends people's sin, have I really declared the gospel? You know what I mean? Like, I've had coworkers say, no, shut up. Like, don't speak because we know you're going to talk about peace. We know, you know what I mean? Like, I've had people tell me, stop talking because we know you're going to talk about Jesus. Hopefully I'm saying this humbly, but I would say that lends authenticity to my calling. Because that's what they said to Jesus. Because that's what they said to Peter and John. That's what they, you know what I mean? So if the world has never looked at the church and said, oh my goodness, shut up, because we know you're just going to talk about Jesus. I would say that's a great sign, right? Like, okay,
Yeah.
good. Then
Yeah.
clearly we're talking about
Yeah.
Jesus, and they don't want to hear it because what does the Bible say? The message of the cross is folly to those who are perishing. So if the world's never looked at us as the church and said, like, if they're, I would go so far as to say, if the world's totally okay
Yeah.
with the message the church is communicating, then we're communicating the wrong message. If an atheist, if a Hindu, if a Buddhist, if a Jehovah's Witness, if a Mormon, if anyone other than a like genuine evangelical Christian could sit and listen to one of my sermons and agree with every single thing I say, I wasted my time and I was not preaching about Jesus. I believe that.
Yeah.
If a Muslim could sit and listen to one of my sermons and agree with every point I said, then I wasn't preaching about Jesus. And I've sinned. Like I have sinned in my calling and I've abandoned my calling.
Yeah.
Now, am I saying that we should be actively trying to make people hate us? You know what I mean? Like, no, Jesus communicated with love, you know?
Yeah. Well, I would even say that Paul in this passage is communicating, like he's not, like he is giving a passage from Isaiah that is talking about God's plan for redemption. And he's saying, this is that day.
Yeah.
This is that redemption.
Yeah, he's still communicating in love. He's still drawing people to Christ. But to answer your question about like, should we see that in our own lives? Like,
yeah, the hardship,
I think we should.
Yeah.
I think we should see evidence that what Jesus said would happen to his apostles and his disciple. Like those who follow me will experience this.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm not experiencing it, then ask, am I following Jesus?
Yeah.
I think of the godliest people I know who have committed to living for truth and integrity and committed to living for Christ regardless of consequence. And they've faced these things.
Exactly, yeah.
My dad has lost his job on 2 different occasions because he would not compromise truth. Like he faced persecution. He faced hardship, right? Like, so I would not say that's a sign of bad things. I would say that's a sign of he's willing to pay the price. He's willing to pay the cost, right? If I say this is my conviction, unless there's going to be consequences, and then I'll kind of backpedal so I don't have to deal with the consequences, well, then is it really your conviction?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's the reason that I ask, because, you know, when Paul, like, I mean, just listen to how he even says, he says, we are treated as impostors, yet are true, as unknown, yet well known, as dying, and behold, we live, as punished, yet not killed, as sorrowful, but yet always rejoicing, poor, yet making people rich, having nothing, yet possessing everything. It's that upside down, you know, I feel like we can have the tendency when our life isn't going well, or we're experiencing these very things, like, I feel like I don't got anything. Everything was ripped away from me. I lost a job. I feel like I'm called to be a professor, you know, your dad or whatever. I lose all of that. It could be very easy to be like, Lord, what are you doing? Like, didn't you call me into this place? Didn't you call me here? You know, but like you said, the very things that we think are like disqualifying factors of our life, of like, oh, do I really believe, like, is this really happening? And that's really the basis for the second part of the question. Is like, you know, we have a tendency to think good life means I'm doing things right.
No. We have a tendency to misdefine good, to wrongly define good.
Well, that's what I mean. Like our tendency of good life, our perspective of a good and satisfied
good
life
with easy.
Yeah, exactly. Or like, and that's easy. But really what, you know, Paul is just, it's like the evidence of my following Jesus is that even despite all of these things, even though I am poor, I know that I have everything in Jesus. I know that you know what I mean?
So I would agree with what sentence you were starting to say, that I agree. I think a good life is a rightly lived life. Like I think a righteously lived life is a good life.
Oh yeah.
But we have made good synonymous with easy. And so we're like, well, a righteously lived life should lead to an easy life. No, I think a righteously lived life should lead to a hard life. But that's good.
Yeah.
Good is not easy. If I could get every Christian in probably my own self, right, at different times, right? Like so I'm including myself in this. If I could have every Christian understand like, one thing, that's a hyperbolic statement, but I would love, and I wonder what would the church look like if Christians stopped equating easy with good. Like if we understood that no, easy is not automatically good. In fact, frequently it's going to be the hard thing that is the good thing, that is the right thing. So let's stop pursuing easy. Let's start pursuing good. Right? Like, it's easy to get a crowd.
Yeah.
You just say what the crowd wants to hear. Popularity's not hard. Just say what people want to hear. Like, that's easy. That's not good. Right? It's hard to say the things that people don't want to hear, but need to hear. That's good.
Yeah.
So if we could just get the church to stop pursuing easy and start pursuing good, oh, man, the difference that it would be.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's easy to just sit at home every night. It's easy to cook for 2 people. It's easy to say that my schedule is the most important thing that's out there. It's hard to say, hey, I want to make sure that my home is ready to have people over to it. Hey, I'm going to spend more money on groceries. I'm going to put more time into cooking so that I can make a dinner for 6 people, right? Like, so that I can make a dinner to take to my neighbor. Like, that's hard. That's harder than just cooking for your immediate family. That's harder than just focusing on your own immediate family schedule. But it is a good thing to fellowship.
Yeah.
It's easier to say, well, I'll let somebody else serve. I'll sit in the service. It's harder to go back in the kids' wing and serve. You have to prepare a lesson. You have to put work in ahead of time. You have to put work in on the weekdays, right? It's way easier to just show up on a Sunday morning and not have to do anything. It's good to serve. It's good to teach. It's good to invest in others.
Yeah.
So if the church could just wrap its mind and heart around, we were never called to easy. Easy is not good. Oh man, the difference that it would be incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think the Western church is behind in that with all the other cultures. Probably because, well, we could get into a whole topic of it. But those are basically the questions, two different questions on 2 different elements of the passage.
Yep.
Because it's a very meaty passage,
Yep.
And rightly so. Like, it's just hard to get to all of it in one sermon.
Yep.
But I think...
Yep. And now
That's
it's
good
also not
conversation.
like a blanket, right? Like, I don't think everybody's going to lose their job. Like, it would be grossly, to go back to our first video, it'd be grossly unfair of me to go beyond Scripture and say, like, well, if you've never lost your job over your faith, you're not a real Christian. I know plenty of wonderfully godly people who have never lost their job over their faith. You know what I mean? Like, if you've never lost your home over your faith, you're not a real Christian. Like, no, that's me going beyond Scripture. You know what I mean? So again, to go back to the first video, to go back to something else, like, we don't put obstacles.
Yeah.
I'd be putting an obstacle in your way if, as your pastor, I said, well, you should be questioning if you're a real Christian or not because nobody's ever spit in your face. Like, Paul was physically beaten. Has anyone ever physically beaten you up? Well, then you're not a real Christian, are you?
Yeah.
Like, no, now I'm putting an obstacle in your way. Like, so we have to be careful not to view everything as, we have to be appropriate in understanding what is prescriptive, what is descriptive.
Yeah,
right?
like we are not...
Paul was shipwrecked.
Yeah.
Paul says, I was shipwrecked for the faith, right? Like,
Yeah. God isn't
Yeah.
calling us to experience everything
every
that
shipwreck.
Paul
Yeah, like,
experienced.
So-
The thing is just hardship. It's
to
just...
say, well, Billy Graham was never shipwrecked on an island and bitten by a poisonous snake. He's not really, like, no, okay, calm down. You know what I mean? Like, right? So that's where, you can't go
Yeah.
beyond Scripture. But I do think what Jesus said will happen to his apostles, we should be asking, is this sort of stuff happening in the lives of the church?
Yeah.
And if society's totally okay with the church, then are we really preaching the message of Christ?
Yeah. I think it's good. Good. Yeah, I didn't know if you had anything anything that you were already thinking about before.
No, those
questions and
were
things like that,
great
so-
questions. I mean, hopefully people see why we read Habakkuk 3 and 1
Yeah.
Corinthians 3. If you don't, reach out. We'll have a conversation. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
But no, those were you and Dawson had good questions. Those were solid. I like just kind of freewheeling on stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I'd much rather, because honestly, that's how life happens. Like, life is not scripted.
Yeah.
Your coworker, at least this has never happened to me. I've never had a friend, I've never had a coworker say like, hey, in 2 weeks, I'm going to ask you this theological question, you know. Please show up ready to discuss. It's always spontaneous, right? So we have to be able to engage spontaneously.
Yeah.
Now, there's nothing wrong with saying like, whoa, Mario, man, that's a really good question. I got to be honest, I think I know how I would answer it, but I don't want to tell you something wrong. Like, are you cool if we circle back to this Thursday, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Don't be ashamed to do that. But don't expect them to submit, you know, in writing 2 weeks ahead of time the question I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
Like, so we have to be able to spontaneously engage. So I love spontaneous conversations.
It's good. I think it's good. And then they got a 2-parter out of it.
Yeah, you got to, man, limited edition.
Yeah.
Like,
we got to figure out how we're going to release these.
Gold
2-parters.
foil. Maybe we'll charge for the second one.
That would be
That would be so messed up.
that would not be good.
That would be so jacked up.
That would not be good.
Oh, boy.
So, all right.
I
Sounds
joke.
good to me.
Cool.
That's it
Yeah,
for
that was
me.
fun. All right. Well, hey, thanks a second time for joining. How many times can I obnoxiously work in second into this video?
Or special edition.
Special limited edition second time. There we go. We said it all again. But thanks for sticking with us through a second video. As always, if you have questions, comments, if you want a third video, really blow people's minds, reach out to us. Otherwise, we'll see you guys Sunday.
See you then.
Hey everyone, Pastor Sam here. Thanks for joining us for another midweek Bible study video. If you didn't see the sermon that we were talking about, you can find it here. Or if you're interested in more of these midweek Bible study videos and thoughts as Pastor Mario and I break things down, you can find that here as well. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all our content. Thanks for joining us.